Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Thanks for joining today. We are on episode 22 of our JMRI series, and I know it's been a bit since we had a JMRI video, but finally got around to working on the next idea I wanted to talk about. So I got asked a question. The question was, can JMRI balance the amount of inputs and outputs for an industry? Specifically, if you have an industry that takes a certain amount of an input and is able to convert that into a specific amount of an output, can you reliably and consistently model that in JMRI? So to explore this example, I decided to use this coal gasification industry here on my Coxswain sub for Trainz 2019. And don't get too hung up on the model itself. I am going to spend some time eventually kind of looking at this model to make a few changes, of course. But we bring coal in, we gasify it into coke, and we take the coal tar and the ammonia out. Those are shipped off as byproducts. Actually, coal tar and ammonia. Yeah, that's right. And then the other one, of course, is the coal gas, and that's piped out. So, but yeah, we're going to talk about if JMRI can balance the inputs to the outputs. I do have some of the math we'll talk about in just a minute, and then I'm going to run a couple scenarios and just kind of give you guys a summary to see if it works. So let's roll the intro, and then after that, I'll catch you guys over in JMRI where we can talk about the math behind the subject. All right, here we are in JMRI, and what I've done is create a location, just called it the City of Industry, which I know is a real place in the SoCal area. Definitely not modeling any specific industry from the City of Industry, just, I needed a name, it caught my attention. But essentially what we're doing is we are modeling a coke industry. You can see we have one spur. I decided for this first example, I would use one spur to represent the entire industry. Of course, I know that probably none of us would do that. And the idea here was so I could get one schedule that would be more easy to monitor and control and see if that would accomplish the things that we need. The idea being that if the schedule would work correctly, then essentially, you could just have some special instructions about where the cars would actually go. It's like, hey, it says it's going to this industry, but it actually goes to these spurs. Now here is the actual spur itself and its settings. You can see I just have two car types. I didn't mess with any exclusions or special cases, but then I did make a schedule. So the first run here was with the schedule using match mode, and match mode just looks for anything in the schedule that it can match to the train that is coming through this location. So I just created a simple train that runs from staging to City of Industry and back, and I just loaded it with coal cars and empty tank cars. So you can see here the hit count. The hit count tells us how many times it has utilized this line item. So currently we have delivered 40 cars of coal. And we bring them in with coal, we ship them out with coke. We have only brought in one car each of a chemical tanker for ammonia and a chemical tanker for coal tar. So let's talk about this weight thing here. The weight setting tells you how many times when a train comes in to serve this industry, how many times you want it to skip this line item. So if I want the train to come in 5 times before it ever serves this this part of the schedule, then I would put a weight setting to 5, and that's exactly what it did. So with a weight setting of 5, I had to run the train 5 times before it ever actually wanted to come pick up this car. Now I currently have it open, so if I were to terminate the train, this would jump to 50 because it's been bringing in 10 hoppers every time, and then this would move to 2 the next time I built the train. So the thing is, it's bringing in more or less 50 cars worth of coal, taking out 50 cars worth of coke before it delivers 1 car of ammonia. Now let's talk about why this matters. So I did some research, and it's not exact science. I definitely had to make a few assumptions, but the research I did found that for every 6,200 tons of coal, you get on average about 4,650 tons of coke. You get about 1,240 tons of coal tar, and you get about 124 tons of ammonia. Now, there were a lot of approximations and assumptions made here, so if you work in the coal gasification or coke making industry, I'm sure there are many things that are different and completely would make my numbers completely irrelevant, and that's okay. This is an example from some quick research facts. I didn't spend more than 30 minutes doing this research. But here's what that means in car loads, because JMRI is all about car loads, not tonnage of inputs and outputs. So if I have 100-ton cars, coal hoppers and tankers that can hold 100 tons, which, by the way, 100 tons of coal tar is about 21,000 gallons, roughly. Or just under, actually, sorry, just under that. It's like 20,000 gallons, which is pretty much an entire tank car. Now, with that, essentially, for every 62 cars of coal, that comes in, you are going to ship out 12 tank cars of ammonia and 12 tank cars of coal tar and 1 tank car of ammonia. So not a lot of ammonia is produced by this process, and that actually makes a lot of sense. It's just a small byproduct. Coal tar is a much more serious byproduct of the coal gasification process. But just in case you didn't know, 2 tons of coal can create 10,000 cubic meters of coal gas. So 62 cars of coal makes like 13 million, I think, or maybe it was 30. I think it might have been 30 million. But tens of millions of cubic meters of gas. That's enough to power, a decent-sized city for days. But anyways, I digress. That's not what we're talking about today. So what that means for us is I wanted, for every 5 cars of coke that it shipped out and 5 cars of coal that it brought in, I wanted it to ship 1 car of coal tar. I actually got these mixed up by accident, but I wanted to ship one car's load of coal tar, because if you think about it, if it's 12 cars of coal tar for every roughly 60 cars of coal, that's 1 out of 5. So I was like, okay, well, in match mode, let's put it here to wait 5. Well, the problem with that is it waited for 5 arrivals of the train. So that's 5 operating sessions. 5 times the train has to be run before it ever picks this car up. Well, that's too much, because instead of getting just 50 cars worth, instead of just getting 5 cars worth, I got 50 cars worth. That's not what we wanted. Like I said, I know this says 40. It's because I haven't terminated it yet. As soon as I terminate this train, it'll say 50. So that brings up a problem. Match mode is not going to be able to balance the inputs and outputs by itself. However, there is one workaround you could do. As an example, if you think about the image at the start of this video with the example of the coke facility, if you shorten your spurs. So we're going to assume that we actually split 2 spurs. Let's say I had 1 spur for bringing in coal and shipping out coke, and another spur for shipping out the tank cars. You could make it where, keep in mind, you can always name them such that they're actually the same place, just different names. You can make it where the length of the spur for the coal and coke is only enough to hold 10 cars worth. If you do that, then you're only ever going to get 10 cars at a time. Or in my case, I could limit it to 5 cars at a time. So if I limit it to where it literally can't give me more than 5 cars at a time, and I make a new spur for the tank cars where it can only do 1 tank car at a time for the coal tar, for example, then it's only ever going to deliver 5 coal cars and take 5 coal cars away loaded with coke. But it will also deliver every time 1 tank car, which will balance it, but that's using the length. Well, what if your spurs are longer than that? Well, then you have a choice to make. You can either try to balance this. So like as an example, I could make a coal tar spur. And let's see, if a tank car is 44 feet, let's just do 50. That'll never give us more than just 1 tank car. Let's get coal out of there. And then, of course, I would make a schedule, call it coal tar because I don't want to waste time, and add that schedule, add the tank car. So we will receive empty, we will ship coal tar, save. But here's the thing. Sorry, I didn't see that. It was on the wrong screen. So created a schedule, chemical tank, empty is what it receives. It ships coal tar. But here's the thing. Since I'm balancing the length of the spur now, I don't need to mess with the weight. So we're just going to save that right there. This is a 50-foot spur. I apologize, I didn't realize that you also can't see that from earlier, but there it is, coal tar spur, 50 foot. That's only big enough for 1 tank car. But then this 1,000-foot spur, let's shorten this to where it's only big enough for 5 coal cars. So the 100-ton coal cars I was using were 44 feet each. So if you allow 2 feet for each car for couplers, I believe that's on both sides of the car, I think actually though, so that would make it 48. So let's do 50 apiece. So 50 times 5, let's do 250. There we go. So we'll save that, take away the chemical tank, and then I'll go to the schedule, and essentially I would remove these two invalid parts from the schedule. So now that the lengths of the spurs are balanced, now this will accomplish what we want. However, what if I wanted to make this spur the one for ammonia? So once again, we only want it to be big enough for one tank car, but this time it needs to only load that tank car 10 times as less frequent as the coal tar. So now we're going to change it to ammonia. We're going to change the name to ammonia. And once again, obviously I'm making a bit of a simplification here, but I'll summarize here in just a minute. So this time though, I'm going to put the weight on 10, because if it normally would give me one tank car for every 5 cars of coke, this time I wanted to bring me one tank car for every 50, or in our case technically 60 coke cars. And so I would make this one weight, because assuming it's going to bring me 5 coal cars every time, and then it's not going to ship this car out until I have brought in 50 coal cars. So for the ammonia, I would give a weight. This allows me to keep my spur length down. Otherwise, I'd have to make the spur for the coal cars long enough to take in 62 cars at once. Now, if you're going to bring in a unit train, you have to do that anyways, and it's okay to do that. I just, for this industry, I didn't want to. But yeah, that would essentially give us the balance. So that time I did change the weight count. So here's a very quick summary. In our case, for every 5 cars of coal that came in, I wanted to ship out 1 car of coal tar. So with that in mind, what we decided to do was make the spurs short enough so every time a train comes, it brings in, or can bring in, 5 cars of coal and 1 car for coal tar. And then it, of course, picks up whatever's there and takes those out. It is a bit of an oversimplification. I'm just making a point. There is another quick simulation I'm going to do here in just a minute. And then the other thing we did was we very quickly changed this coal tar spur, even though I didn't save it. We briefly changed it in order to demonstrate how you could use the weight function to force it to only serve that spur every 10 times a train comes, which now means that instead of it bringing a tank car to be loaded with ammonia once every time it comes, it's now only going to bring it every 10 times it comes, which means it will deliver around 50 coal cars, and that is far closer to what we actually wanted. So if you want to balance the length of the spur with match mode, then you can make this work. All right, but you have to balance with match mode the length of the spur. Otherwise, match mode will not deliver what you're expecting. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to change this to sequential. I'm going to pause the video, get everything set up, and then we'll come back and talk about the results. All right, see you in just a second. All right, so with the last simulation, our last option, we put it into sequential mode here. And this is where the order it delivers the car matters. So it's not going to move on to the next row in your schedule until it has delivered everything from the previous schedule. So my original test was done with a count of the coal at 10. Actually, sorry, no, it was 5. And then the count of the tank chem for coal tar was at 1, and then the count for ammonia was at 1. But I set the count for ammonia at a weight of 10. So the train would have to serve 10 times after trying to deliver the ammonia car before it would ever actually deliver the ammonia car. So that's going to take a very long time, especially since that means it roughly has to deliver 50 cars of coal basically. The problem I found with match mode, or sequential mode, which is actually the exact reason I don't use it, is it caused the local to actually not bring cars several times or not pick them up several times. And I'm just personally, I don't like that. If I'm going to run a local to an industry, it needs to deliver or pick up cars or both. That's just how it is. So there are 2 ways you can fix this problem to prevent it from doing that and to make it consistently deliver cars. One is the ammonia and the coal tar, they could be put on a different spur. You could go back to having an individual spur for each commodity if you wanted to, or you could even put those 2 just on the same spur, and then it would be fine, because then it would just deliver your coal every time. It would take coke, problem solved. The other option is to do what I've got here, which is where I put all the weights back to 0, but I changed the count to be, 62, 1, and 12. So 12 for coal tar, 1 for ammonia, and 62 coal cars. The only problem with this is it is not going to deliver an ammonia car, a tank car, or a tank car for coal tar until you have delivered 62 coal cars. Now, would that be how it works in real life? Probably so. A unit train of coal comes in, it delivers 62 cars of coal, it ships out 62 cars of coke. They're just not quite as full. And then, oh, look, now we've got enough demand that we need 2 tank cars. Okay, so the industry orders up 2 tank cars. And, if you balance it right, you could have the 2 tank cars sitting there waiting when the coal train shows up, and then the next local that comes in picks them up. And so, to be fair, in sequential mode, if you want to balance the inputs and outputs, you can do that with just the count. And it will do exactly what you need. But it will only move through each sequence only after each one has been served. So if you don't put them on the same spur and you instead put them on different spurs, you will need to adjust the weights so that it will wait the appropriate amount of times. Otherwise, you'll be delivering however many cars of coal and however many tank cars every time. So if you want to use sequential, put everything on the same spur. My recommendation, personally, don't use the weights. Just use the proper counts with the ratios, and then just run it through the sequence. I'll be honest though, my personal favorite, and what I'll be doing is still running it in match mode, and then just adjusting the length of the spurs to something that's appropriate, and then maybe putting a 1 or 2 weight on there to make, like for example, the ammonia car be considerably less frequent. But at least when you're in match mode, you're pretty much always going to get a car delivered. But yeah, that's because it looks for anything that will match, not just, oh, it's got to match this right now. So like this count over here says it's currently delivered 20, and it's not going to move to this next line item until it delivers 42 more cars. So just my opinions here. I personally am going to go back to sticking with match, but we did run a couple scenarios with match, and we ran one with sequential. They both have their benefits, their drawbacks, but if you want to balance the inputs and outputs, honestly, the easiest setup is probably sequential. But I personally think the closest simulation of what is probably more realistic, where it's not so rigid, is match mode with limited length spurs. Just my humble opinion. Take it for what it is. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. For those of you guys who are like me, who really enjoy the procedural side of industries, not just, hey, 5 cars go here, 2 cars go there, but rather a specific amount of cars go in and out in order to actually simulate the production of certain things and consumption of others. If that's kind of up your alley, this video was for you. So thanks as always for watching and being the best part of the channel, and I will catch you guys out there for the next one.